How are you? So far, so good. And that's good to hear, yeah, with fire stuff and whatnot. All right. Hit live on all the other stuff, so hopefully more people come hang out with us. Stefan, great to have you here. If you would like to join us with um, jumping on stage, asking questions with your microphone, camera's optional. You're going to want to join as a full member of Startmata, this community that we got going on. That will allow you to jump in, and you can do so for free. 60-day trial for free as a supporter. So no worries there. And then you can also use chat to ask questions. I'm not sure as a guest if you can use chat or not. We'll find out. But yeah, Boyne, if you want to come up on stage, ask some questions, feel free to raise your hand. You know the drill. Uh, Craig, how about you give us an introduction?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Craig Silverstein. I am a business strategist and business intelligence consultant, and I've had a couple consulting companies over the past, and I've um, started working with startups initially several years back, and have gone through. I guess my largest M&A that I was part of was SyncSketch going into Unity, so that gave me a ton of exposure into both the SaaS and the tech world, but also coming up through a pretty large company in the media and entertainment space, which I've been a part of for about 20 years, most of my career so far. So out with new programs in business intelligence that I'm creating that are focused on really gathering as much insight as possible about products in the market and potential users or potential target market segments to leverage and infiltrate as a new product on the market or an existing product that's looking for kind of growth spurts or mergers or potential acquisition targets with private equity or venture capital. So lots going on there. It's never a boring day for sure with the companies I work with, but it's a very interesting space to be in.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. We got a couple people that joined us on Twitch. Some others. Yeah. While we wait for Stefan, and Boyne to have some questions for you, let's start with like the simple stuff, right? Like for entrepreneurs that are trying to go from entrepreneur to actual entrepreneur and build an idea, pursue that ambition. What top three mistakes you see early stage entrepreneurs making that uh, you can help them avoid?
Yeah, I think in terms of mistakes, one of the big things I see is that a founder will come up with an idea, and I don't think there's necessarily any bad idea. I think all ideas are worth exploring, and you see how far you can take it and how well they connect with people. I think one of the big things is not having a curious enough mindset about what is this idea, who does it really affect, and how am I making a meaningful impact on society, whether it's my customers, users, whatever it is. So I think leading with that impact mindset first and getting super curious about it is one way to correct a lot of mistakes that could happen. Um, a lot of people say this, but it's very easy to create a product that nobody wants. I'm sure a lot of founders have done that before. And sometimes it's good to actually experience that um, sooner rather than later because you can learn a lot about, you know what, maybe I didn't research a full part of the market enough, or I didn't realize what I was actually creating and what it meant to potential customers. So I think that's a huge start. So keeping that curious mindset. I'd say another part is being pretty particular about what you're spending money on as a startup founder. Um, and who you're going on the venture with. My first tech startup back in 2012. We were creating some pretty cool stuff. We got to the prototype level, and then me and my founding team actually fizzled out a little bit. And I think part of that was because we weren't super engaged, and things get pretty expensive when you're a startup founder, if you're building especially a tech product. So if your founders aren't super engaged, if you're not super aligned, and you're not um, really building a product, like I said initially, that you're curious about, that you keep exploring, that you're constantly obsessed with, it it could be pretty taxing, and you fizzle out. So with that, I would say be careful about how you and your co-founders are aligned, or you and the people that you're starting to bring into your product or community or service, whatever you're creating. Keep that alignment, keep that engagement. And if people start to fizzle out and start losing interest, it's really important to understand why. Because if the people that are building your product with you aren't staying engaged, then it's very possible that your customers will not stay engaged either. So there's definitely a close tie there, and I think that's one of the biggest either drivers of success or kind of self destruction in a company, and that's very internal. Is both the engagement and alignment of the people who are really driving the product and the creation process.
You're touching on a couple really important foundational things with any product, any service, any business, and really it's about your branding too. And like I'm dropping in the chat, just like what I call guiding documents: value statement, mission statement, cultural statement, vision statement, and then there's this extra one I add, and other people may as well: experiential goal statement. And I also think about products and services in a different way from problem solution. And I think about it as, what's the experience you're providing to people? What's that unique experience? What are the benefits that are being provided through that experience? And that's where values really kind of being, derived from. How enjoyable that experience is, and the benefits that are provided to people. And a lot of what you're talking about is about understanding, who you're creating an experience for, who you're providing benefits to, which is really important. And digging into that niche group as a starting point and talking to those people. And the other thing that's really, wise that you're touching on as well is that alignment between you and your co-founders or any other stakeholder that you're working with. It's so important to make sure you're in alignment. And that's where your branding is going to really have an opportunity to shine, and why it's so important to kind of do those guiding documents to start with. So you're on the same page with your team, with your your customers, with everyone, whatever strategy or decision you come up with, right? So yeah, it's really refreshing to hear you put so much emphasis on those things. What kind of exercises or best practices can you suggest in regards to identifying what those are and how you maintain that alignment? And I kind of gave a little bit of a starting point with how I do it with those guiding documents, but I'd love to hear your input too.
Yeah, I think 100%. First, figuring out, like you said, like a mission statement, company values, how I'd say, even to take it a step further, how you're communicating those and how you're actually living those. I think there's an alignment between three things that I think are absolutely critical, and you can tell when a company breaks away from these particular kind of three huge factors because they suffer publicly very bad. One is mission, being very very clear on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that kind of vision of what you're moving towards. So whatever your product is that you're creating, and the team that you're with, there's a current state and then there's a future state. And really looking at the landscape of that future state that you're trying to achieve is huge. And the mission really is that journey to get there, and how you're doing that in your very unique way. So branding is a huge part of that very unique way of how you're getting there. But a lot of kind of the force behind branding is also a company's values and the founder's values. So I think that's really the second big wheel of this. So first you have the mission and the vision that mission's driving towards. Then you have values, which is not the journey itself, but it's how you're willing to achieve the mission. It's what's really um, that image and that not even image, but lifestyle that your company's living to get from your current state to your future state. And then I think the third um, big, I guess, if it's a trifecta of principles that go along with this, the other is communication. So you have the mission, you have values, and then you have communication, which is the way you're actually um, getting in touch with your customers, with your employees, all the stakeholders that are part of your journey. Communication is probably one of the biggest factors that are kind of make or break a company. And when any of these three factors are disjointed, you can tell. There have been companies in the past, I know I've been part of several companies that it appears they have a very clear set of values and a very clear mission. And their mission statements on their website, all of their users know what their mission is, and they know what their value offering is. And then all of a sudden, if a company breaks from its values or communicates something that goes against the mission statement, you see a ton of churn. And churn's when it's basically a loss of customers, loss of revenue, because customers either jump to another solution, or we've seen things like boycotts and different things like that. And the real driving force behind those is when a company gets detached from either their values, their mission, a company pivoting too hard away from what customers actually want will cause a ton of churn. So always keeping the mission, the values, and communication aligned. And there's two ways to go about how you set all of those up within a company. One is being super obsessed about customers and what customers want. The other is kind of being a trendsetter and setting the pace for a market. If you're creating a new market that is rapidly expanding and rapidly growing with a customer base, it's going to evolve and it's going to shape. And the company needs to both understand its relationship with its customers and really have a solid idea of what is shaping the the essence of a company. And sometimes the customers have a super strong role, sometimes the company itself. But in the end, it's really a community that is shaping a company. And that's both the company, the employees, and the customers and the stakeholders that are there. So it's not just a black and white process. There's a lot of factors involved, and it's really it gets in depth, and that's part of what makes business so fun is that it's not always clear sometimes how a market's shaping and where people are going.
I love a lot of this, especially some of these keywords you're using, especially community, and that's you know I think an overlooked goal that a lot of businesses should have that that can be either ignored or devalued by founders or leadership. It's building a community around your brand, around your products, around your services. And it may seem a little bit silly, but I'm sure you can speak to this more. But one of the most defensible positions you can have as a business amongst competitors is a thriving community, because that's where you have those loyal, diehard customers that are willing to roll with you when you make mistakes or you try new things, as long as what you're saying stands true. You're still abiding by your guiding principles, that mission, those values, that culture. As long as those things are still in alignment with those people in the community, you can have a lot of leeway with different kind of like experiments or trials with new things. As far as like a product service goes, your brand's still being maintained. So it's really good to hear you say that and call attention to that. The other thing that kind of like is related to this in communication is setting and meeting expectations. And the more effective you are at communicating, the easier it is to set the correct expectations in any of those stakeholders, whether again it's like co-founders, strategic partners, investors, customers, whatever. And the more effective you are at meeting those expectations, the happier people will be with you because they don't feel like you're letting them down. They don't feel like you are confusing them or frustrating them and coming up short with something that you said you'd do. I'm curious in that regard, how do you suggest running those experiments in a way that is going to mitigate risk and optimize for that communal spirit of people being willing to roll with you when you're trying new things?
Yeah, I think the first step is finding um, your perfect target customer. And I typically put a lot of work into what that means for a company that's building a product. And you don't even have to necessarily have a product built yet to start figuring out who that is. And one of the things that's emphasized, I think, a lot in the VC world is product over purpose. Sometimes VCs love to see an actual like product built, something usable, some kind of prototype, and people build all these products that nobody wants, and it's because they're missing the very important step of the customer. And people break customers down in target markets, and a lot of people hear TAM, SAM, SOM to really identify who the most meaningful customer base is. I think it goes deeper than that. I think one thing that people building a product or a service really need to start with is working very closely with what is potentially the perfect customer and taking the feedback that they have and setting up time with them to actually, and it doesn't have to be like an interrogation, like 100 questions about how they feel about a particular product, but learning about their day to day and what the biggest pain points are that they experience and what's actually super meaningful to them is the perfect place to start. You'll see in my subject line of my email, I call it the 4 M's, and that's be mindful, be meaningful, be mighty, and be someone's miracle. And I think that is pretty much the process that startups, especially, or new products, or even established companies, just incorporating that practice into their product building, into their R&D, into their customer relations and their customer success. And basically, I'll drive into those super fast. Being mindful, it's literally instead of feeding what you have to customers, learning a ton about what they want and what's going to be most useful for them and what their day to day looks like and what their biggest challenges are. And you'll find where the opportunities are as you do that. So being super mindful, picking up on cues from a market or a customer, then being meaningful, which is what you're building is not just because you want to build it. I mean, it can be, but that's going to be a hobby, not necessarily a business. But building something that's meaningful and is targeting a use case that will actually have an impact. And that's going back to kind of that mission, that vision, and that impact statement. And then from there, being mighty. Like obstacles happen, challenges happen, companies get knocked down, they rebuild. Key people might leave a company. It is rough for a little bit, but you keep moving forward. Finances are always on a founder's mind, especially in the earliest stages. So different challenges will occur. Be mighty. Like if something's really meaningful and it's having an impact, stick with it. See how far you can take it. But don't just have a mindset where you're kind of in a tunnel vision type of mode where you're not seeing opportunities. I'd say connecting with the meaningful customers and the meaningful clients is super important to be able to keep building and keep moving forward. And then lastly is, like I said, like be someone's miracle, especially in early stages. Don't be afraid to experiment. Of course, keep clear expectations on what's an experiment and what's your like core product, or what shouldn't just kind of be flipped on its head overnight. There's a happy balance. But I think being open to curiosity and experimentation will lead to huge amounts of success and will also lead to a better product market fit. Because if you're not willing to really understand what the market needs and adapt and change to that, you're never going to thrive as a company and be able to really um, release what's actually the most meaningful product and probably the most profitable product at that point. So I'd say go out on a limb, do experiments, and do things. I don't want to say do things for free, but do happy favors as a startup, as someone trying to experiment. And like I said, be someone's miracle. When I was testing some research products that I have, I did it for a couple of startups just to see, hey, will this work? How effective will it be? And some of those startups, it did a complete 180 from heading down a really rough path into, okay, we have super powerful strategic clarity and a path forward. And for me, that really helped refine my own product, and it was being a miracle for them. So don't be afraid to engage in those relationships. That really helps build a company into its full potential. And I'd say having that curious mindset allows you not only to build into that potential, but to raise the roof of that potential. There's always a company saying, hey, well, if we head on this trajectory, then we can hit a target of revenue by X amount in 3 years or 2 years. And while that's really great to model out, part of the thing, especially that my company does, is look at, okay, well, here's what one model shows we can achieve in so many years. How can we take that even further? How can we think outside of the box and kind of through that 4M process, um, and and really build something that's going to break expectations of revenue models or targets that we're trying to hit? And the answers are out there. I think there's always a better way to do something, or a faster way to get somewhere, or sometimes the faster way to get there isn't the best way. So it's a very multifaceted kind of thing to do, which is business.
Yeah, no, again, like you're touching on a lot of important kind of foundational things, especially in regard to, yeah, doing things that aren't the fastest to start. And like, there's common kind of phrases out there, like, do things that don't scale being one of the most popularized, sayings for startups. And a lot of people don't really understand what that means. And you're kind of touching on it where you want to spend the time early just building the highest quality engagements you can with potential customers, potential clients, users, and something that I do when I'm working as a UX designer researcher is very much in line with what you're talking about, where I'll try to shadow someone and map their day to understand the entire user flow, the entire like workflow of them trying to obtain a certain type of experience or certain type of benefit that I'm trying to provide to them as an alternative to what they already are doing currently, right? Whether that's a direct competitor, like another product, another, piece of software that they're already using, or in some cases, they're cobbling together a bunch of different things that aren't meant to go together in order to obtain that very distinctive experience or benefit for their life, for their, job, for whatever it is. And so I think that's really important that you're touching on, to just like, invest that time and that effort to get close to someone, to get close to different people that you're trying to work with and ultimately serve and cater to. And the other thing too is that, like, yeah, you don't need to do a bunch of stuff for free, but there are different types of tests that you want to qualify your product is good. And, bringing in 1 to 5 different types of people that fit within that target customer profile and giving them your product for, free for a trial basis or, limited basis to see if they actually get the enjoyment and the benefits out of it. And if not, you want to talk to them and understand why and figure out what's going on, right? So you can improve and optimize and iterate or pivot if that need be. So you touch on a lot of beautiful things. Boyne raised his hand, so I'm going to bring Boyne up, and yeah, we'll go from there. Boyne, I hope you're ready. And William, Steven, again, yeah, feel free, Steven. If you can't use the chat, just join as a supporter. It's free. Come hang out with us. Use your mic. Use your chat. All right.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hey Blaine.
Hey, I appreciate you giving us the overview, and you touch on quite some interesting points. I have personal experience in creating communities for the product and creating excitement and all that stuff. I don't know. I don't remember. Have we met in one of the meetups?
Yeah,
The
I
lunches?
think so.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So you're probably somewhat familiar with what I'm doing, but for the audience, I will go quickly. I have my own company. I started it about 20 years ago, initially developing and selling software libraries to other developers. I specialized in areas that are complex for them, like video processing, audio processing, digital signal processing, computer vision, AI, industrial control. So I give them basically a software library whenever they have this particular type of need and they don't have the expertise, they can buy the library, integrate in their solution, and off they go. So as part of that, to simplify, since those are complex topics for even many of the developers, I also develop technology which allows them to visually develop and implement all this functionality without writing code. Optionally, of course, they can always write code. That's always also on the table. So that technology, became popular among developers since it was helping them to speed up their development. But what I did is a few years ago, I started working more and more with microcontrollers, IoT devices like this one, robots, and all kinds of such stuff. And I discovered that, wow, yeah, even devices like this. I discovered that this was during the makers boom, and there were a lot of makers and enthusiasts, and they had no problems building their projects, but they all had big problems programming the whatever they were making. So I myself was facing similar challenges. I was working on a number of projects, and they were taking forever. It it was I was facing all kinds of challenges. So what I did is I decided to see if I can port my visual development solution and adapt it for IoT and microcontrollers development. I did it initially for myself to help my own development. Then I showed it to a bunch of people. Everybody loved it. They started using it. I showed it to more people, and one thing led to another. I created a new product called Visuino, effectively a separated business. It has become quite popular worldwide. As we have, again, back to what you were talking about, giving free versions to customers and building communities and stuff like that. We have free version, standard version, and eventually we ended up having professional version because big companies started buying as well. That's another long story. The point is that according to our closest estimate, we have around 500,000 users of the free version alone. So the product is reasonably popular worldwide. And now I'm looking to do the same thing, adapting the same visual development technology, but this time to make it possible for people that build AI models to build those models without writing code. So sorry for the long intro. That's what I'm doing. Some of what I just mentioned kind of correlates with what you are talking about. Effectively, Visuino is a good example where I started with building a very crappy prototype. And the first thing I did is showing it to people and testing the water to see what people think about that, whether or not there is any demand for such a product. Or think, okay, again, I was doing it for myself as well, but I really wanted to turn it into a product as well. So I followed exactly this path. So that's my story. I would be interested to hear what you think about all of that, what kind of recommendations you can give me, what suggestions you can give me in terms of what I'm planning at least, and on a small scale doing in terms of the new AI stuff, or any other advice or suggestions.
Yeah. Uh, I see a lot of great things that you're doing, especially offering a tiered model, like a freemium model. So with um, I'd say both software, hardware, anything. There's a very calculated strategy when it comes to feature tiering. Like you said, you have a free tier, standard tier, and then more of an enterprise tier. And I think as a product develops, it's important to understand what's going on with each tier, how advanced one tier is to the next tier, and also if all of the tiers are the right tiers to have, whether you have too many or not enough. I know some products will release a product and they'll have 2 or 3 tiers, and sometimes the value proposition of each tier is set really well, and it creates a very clear, distinct product grouping. And other times it could be a little hazy, or maybe there's a gap missing in terms of features that a customer might want from one tier to the next. And all that really has to do with aligning the value proposition. So one thing I think is super important. By the way, I'm a huge fan of freemium models. Uh, I like when companies are not afraid to add value before they expect to receive value back from customers. I think that's really one great way to break the ice and just to show what the capabilities are of a product, as well as how kind of where the limits are to expand and really start building into a workflow in a more productive way. So I think first looking at the tiers and making sure that the right value proposition is in each tier is super important. I'd say if you're building into AI and that's going to be another kind of like feature set or product that you're going to be offering, it will be important to understand, is this something, a value proposition that belongs in that enterprise tier or that high end tier that we're offering, or is this a new product that's going to be a new tier or a new package of products? And trying to determine what the use cases are of it and where the value's
Yeah.
being offered.
Just to interject, the AI thing will be a separated company and a separated startup. So those
Okay.
things will stay independent. Again, it will use technology that I have already developed and I have possessed, but that will be separated in completely
Mhm.
separated product line, company, whatever.
Okay. Yep. So for, I'd say, as you're building out the AI product tier, it really the same principles would apply in terms of the value offering. And I think the only way to really understand the actual true value that you're offering customers is to have very deep conversations with them, allowing them to use it, really inviting them into the building process of what you're putting together. Because not only if your customers are building something alongside of you, first off, having them involved in that creative process, and I say creative process while it's a research and development process as well, but allowing them into that process allows you to create a more valuable product. And when you create a more valuable product, it sells for more money just naturally. And I think that is something that's highly underestimated. Some companies have a very good idea of what they want to build, but they don't want to build beyond that, which is okay. But in my view, it's important to look at, why aren't we building beyond that? If a company chooses not to, is it because of resource limitations? Is it because of more of the operational things happening? Or is a company not building beyond a particular product because it's not their target customer that they want to serve? So there's very distinctive ways to look at how to build the right product with the right value proposition to the right customer, and making sure. And that's why I mentioned earlier, starting with the right customer and who you think the perfect customer would be for your company and product. And it's also a good conversation to have with co-founders and people working with you, where you kind of question, what if we look across users and industries and different use cases? What changes with our product? Who can we serve that's beyond our target customer? And just taking a look at that, it's not to say you need to start venturing off into different verticals and different customer segments, because that also gets expensive when you look at who are we marketing to. Because every time you market, every time you go to an event, every time you're communicating with customers, all of that costs time and money, and you have to be very selective with that as well, because as a startup especially, you can spread yourself thin. But getting those right customers there and figuring out who you're serving and who you can serve best, and the value offering there is going to be super important.
Yeah, that's good information. Just one thing I would like to mention. When I One of the first things I did after I made Wizwin was immediately to create Facebook groups, and at that time Google Plus was available. Google Plus Circles, or whatever they used to call it, and there was immediate engagement, and I used a lot of feedback, even things like the name of the product, the logo of the product, and so on and so forth was decided, and even pricing initially was decided within the community. So I was utilizing what you're generally speaking suggesting.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's what you have to do. And sometimes experimentation is the only way to really find out things too. I think a lot of companies could freeze up and have indecision to make moves, and sometimes that's kind of as self-destructive as really taking an educated guess or experimenting. Um, and guesses should be educated, especially when they affect your budget and your employees or your product and your customers. But at the same time, a company, and I often tell clients this, remaining stagnant is one of the most dangerous things a company can do, because there's always somebody building something for a particular use case that's probably very similar to yours. I talk to a ton of startups, especially with new technology, and I'd say 80% of them say they don't have competition. But when you read between the lines, there's a lot of companies out there that are building things that are um, either alternative products or substitutes for what they're building, and it's very interesting seeing how things are happening behind the scenes. And I think AI is going to be particularly interesting as products start hitting the market, because a lot of the technology is very new and currently evolving, and it's evolving very quickly. And while the market's starting to get flooded with a lot of applications, there's a lot of applications that haven't been built yet that are working behind the scenes. Their founders are building products behind the scenes, and there's going to be a flooded market where all of a sudden all these things that people have been building, all these VCs are funding primarily AI technology now, and there's going to be a ton of similar applications that people thought had no competitors for, and all of a sudden there's 10, 15, 20 of the same application out there, and they're all eating each other's market share. And then it gets really tough for each company to actually be able to get the solid customer base that they want. And that's why I say remaining stagnant is always very dangerous, or thinking that you have the answer, not looking beyond what you're currently building and kind of the full spectrum of what your impact is and the customers you're able to influence. Because if there isn't a competitor yet for a product, there definitely will be eventually in the future, or a product will come in as kind of what they call a blue ocean product, with the blue ocean strategy, where they'll come in and they'll flip the entire business model for a market on its head, kind of like what Netflix did when they came in and said, you know what, renting DVDs is great, but we're going to take that model and start streaming. And then you see how long it took for other companies to catch up. Only a couple of years ago did we start getting HBO Go and Disney Plus, and I think Hulu was one of the earlier entrants. But it took so long for those companies to catch up to a Netflix. So looking at not just the product itself, but how the product is presented and shaped and distributed to customers is super important as well.
Boyne, I'm curious. So you got a couple different businesses, and uh, you could even like very clearly identify them at different stages of like a business life cycle. I'm curious for each one, in just one sentence, what is the challenge that each of your businesses is facing? Because Craig has a lot of like really amazing experience with different size companies. So I'm curious, like, yeah, what like quick little advice he can pop off for you for each of your companies. One challenge, one sentence, each business.
Yeah, that's difficult to summarize in a single sentence. Definitely, for me, the biggest challenge is managing and deciding where I should put my efforts. Obviously, I cannot put my efforts everywhere at the same time, so it has to be a balancing act. Uh, the they're just a bit too different. While my traditional software libraries business is oriented toward exclusively the die-hard, I mean, software developers, traditional software developers. It's a relatively niche market, so it has to be handled as a niche business. It's a close community. Yeah, I don't know if I can summarize in a single sentence something that hopefully he can answer. The Visuin, on another hand, it was doing best during the makers years. Now the makers movement is not what it used to be. It's not dead, and Visuin has appeal much beyond the makers movement. That's also reflected in the sales. While the standard version, the sales are definitely dropping. At the same time, the professional version, the sales are peaking because the tool is becoming more and more popular in the traditional businesses. Obviously, that means I have to shift my marketing strategy and the way I sell the product. uh, we are in process of doing that shift. As the market changes, you have to make shift. So okay, here is a question. Since yeah, Visuino is probably the most interesting one. Questions in terms of Visuino. If you're shifting from a maker's market where you're selling to mom and pops, I mean, whatever, I mean, students and enthusiasts and hobbies and all that stuff, into a model where you're selling into companies effectively, right? And selling them products that they will use for their development. Uh, what well, with the makers, I think we have nailed it how to best sell to those. What would be the best way to expand and to work to sell more with those companies? Would you suggest resellers, or would you suggest creating a dedicated sales force that is going to start hitting those companies? Or what would be the best approach in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. So looking at the difference between the go to market strategy in terms of Well, actually, let me start from the beginning. Having that different tiered kind of disparity between like the mom and pop shops and the more larger businesses and the more the market that would be a significant revenue stream if it adopts kind of in that larger, more enterprise kind of market. That's very typical, and a lot of companies with both software, hardware, go through those kinds of consumer versus enterprise kind of shift. And I'll say back with SyncSketch when I joined, it was mainly an education product. It was for colleges, universities. That's what it was actually built on. And it wasn't until after COVID hit that it became hugely strong with the enterprise market. So there was a catalyst there where studios couldn't work as close together, and they didn't go back to um, to stripping away Sketch once they went back to the studios and everything, because being able to do their work with the software that they had access to was more powerful, more effective than just doing it the traditional way. So it revolutionized how people were actually working their day to day in their professions at the enterprise level. So um, in looking at that, it's very common where something starts off for the makers market where it's very mom and pop, small business, colleges, students. I think the best technology typically starts with students, and that's great because they they won't hesitate to give feedback as well, even though they're not as experienced with the real world. But it also gives founders room to experiment, where if they mess something up for students, yeah, that's rough. But if they mess something up for a multinational corporation, it's a lot less forgiving. So there's more room to play and develop the product. But one thing, when you have a product that is split that way and you see that it's going to pick up very fast with the smaller tiered customers, you have to look at the value proposition again of why are customers using one version versus another? Are they different customers, or um, are they potentially enterprise customers using a lower tier product? Because if a giant corporation can get away with using an $8 product instead of a $50 product on a higher tier, they'll do that. It makes no sense for them to upgrade unless there's a very specific reason, and that's why putting the features in the right tiers to get that upsell funnel. Not only are you trying to make it clear that they're different products, but you have to make it clear on how a company steps up from one product to another to another. So if there's students or small businesses using one tier, there should be, if you have an upsell funnel with the tiers, there should be a very clear reason that a company would move to a higher tier. And if there's two ways to do this. One is the blunt way that nobody likes, which is, oh, if you're using more than 10 users, you have to use a higher tier of the product. Or if you're going to distribute something to so many people, you have to raise tier. And nobody likes that because you're basically saying, only because my company has more people, you're forcing me to use a more expensive product, but there's no additional value for each user. It's just because my corporation's bigger. And I agree. Customers have a right to kind of not like that method as much. But what's really cool is when you find that feature that will really get people from that lower tier to that higher tier, and they're okay with paying more for that feature. And that's what's super important, is finding out. And that's why working so close with customers to find out their pain points, to figure out exactly what that feature is going to be and how you're going to roll it out and how you're going to sell it and get that market there. But to do that, you need to talk to both. You need to talk to the customers who aren't your customers yet, because they don't think that your product, either they haven't heard of it or they don't think the value proposition's there for them. So you're looking at those bigger customers as well as those smaller mom and pop shops that might have a reason to upgrade but haven't yet, and why haven't they? So you need to talk to both and say, how can we get those ones that are kind of teetering on the edge that should be using a more valuable product? How do we um, get them to get the value? And really, it's not about them giving you more money, it's about you giving them more value. You have to show them where the value is at the higher tier, and forget about the whole exchange of how much that's going to impact revenue. I mean, that's super important, but as a business owner, first finding the value and then figuring out what that's going to mean for revenue, that comes second. Otherwise, you're going to get into a loop where you're constantly chasing revenue instead of the value, and you don't want to get stuck in that loop, because it's actually not the right way to grow a company. But I want to go back to another point, which you said earlier, Blaine, which was managing efforts. To, like, what do you spend your time and energy on? Because as a one person who, it sounds like you own multiple businesses, it you could get spread thin very fast. And one thing I always tell clients of mine is first thing you should be doing is putting together a not to do list. You come up with your list of all the stuff that you want to do and start taking stuff off of it and putting it on the not to do list, because that's going to be just as valuable as what you're trying to do, and the things that you have to do in order to keep things afloat. And you're going to find, and I think all founders and co-founders find, that they're doing a lot of stuff that they think they should be doing that they absolutely shouldn't. Maybe if they had unlimited resources and unlimited time and money, they can spend time on it. But until you build out the staff where you have, first you have the revenue to build the staff, and then you have the resources to be able to handle all of those smaller operations. So that not to do list, I think, is going to be a game changer for you if you start to build that out.
Okay, I mean, yeah, interesting discussion. I don't know whether or not there is something else I can think of. I mean, I surely need a lot of help, but I'm not sure if there is something that I can directly ask you right at the moment that we can come up with.
I
And
like that.
Gary has some interesting idea for discussion, which he always does.
No, I like that he's got your gears going real hard, which is good. That's a good sign. Yeah. No, yeah, that was all wonderful advice and helpful. I was thinking about, like, yeah, my own stuff too, so I appreciate it. Um, yeah, I'm looking at the time. We're at 1:55. William, if you want to come up, ask some questions, now the time. If you want to squeeze something in. Um, let me see here. Looks like Steven just jumped off, or maybe they're trying to connect or reconnect. Um, yeah. Boyne, that was good. Craig, that was good. Um, let me see. William's typing. We got some activity. and yeah, Steven, again, if you're able to use chat, feel free to. Last chance. Okay, cool. William says, no questions. This was useful. Thanks. Awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah. Craig, how you feeling?
Feeling good. I can't believe how fast the time flew by on this session. I was like, wow, a whole hour. How are we going to fill this? But with questions like what you and Blaine have been coming up with, we can go on probably for another 5 hours.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, again, like you've got a real fun, like, deep background in different areas and expertise, and haven't even like started getting too deep into any of that. But yeah, I mean, if we don't have any more questions on the way, and if we're up on time, I'm curious. So we kind of like started off by asking, like, three common mistakes people make, and with their starting their company. And again, you've got experience with a lot of different size companies, and you touched on a couple different, like, aspects as you grow and as your company's chugging along, what to pay attention to and continuously maintain, that product market fit, and talking with your customers, your users, and making sure you're staying relevant. You're able to keep giving them a good experience with benefits and, value. I'm curious, as companies get to that scaling stage, they're working on, either they have already secured that Series A funding to start, pumping in a lot of capital to scale, or maybe they're a little bit further along. What are some other kind of like, key tips to not lose sight of as you're at that stage and trying to manage things and keep that growth going?
Yeah, I think one thing, once a company gets funding, uh, looking at what's most important. I think a lot of times companies lose sight of that a little bit, and and not just companies in general, but always going back to the the mission statement, the purpose. Some companies have a purpose statement, although they don't necessarily put that on their like website as much as you see like mission statement and things like that. But I'd say a lot of times companies, once they hit that funding stage, they'll be putting out memos to their investors that say basically state their progress, what they've been spending money on, any risks that they see involved as they're growing. And I think companies start to forget to revisit their mission statement and their purpose, and how they're communicating that. And a lot of times, all of the metrics, they'll build like balanced scorecards where they can track KPIs, and they'll create their executive memos. I know Amazon has a very famous format where they'll have what's most critical in their KPIs in there. And it's great for leadership to see how the numbers are going. But all too often, companies forget how their culture is going, and they forget how their mission's going. And it's very easy for a company to make mistakes when they don't keep revisiting that. So I'd say with every quarterly business review a company has that has, let's say they hit that 150, 200 employee mark, and they start to have larger town halls and quarterly meetings where they're telling both investors, stakeholders, and employees how their progress is, how their customers, and everything looks in terms of quantitative value and data. I think it's very important to, in those meetings, set aside time to say, what does this mean for our mission? How has our mission seriously advanced over the last 3 months if you're doing a quarterly meeting? And I think that's super important. And don't just brush over it quickly as like, yeah, things seem good. Maybe as an executive, like I said, one of the top 5 reasons companies fail, and this is larger companies as well as small companies, is executive engagement. Uh, and having executives responsible not just for putting the numbers down on paper and showing the progress through numbers, but also what it means for the company's mission and keeping alignment there. And also strategy. I know, especially smaller companies are like, we're focused on a product. We don't care about strategy right now. But really, it's important even to have a product strategy if you're just building your product. But especially as a company hits those funding rounds, go back and say, okay, so this is our mission, this is our purpose, and this is how we're strategically driving there. And the way I think of strategy is basically a series of initiatives in a company that compound value across the entire company. So they're laser focused and they're all building value on top of each other for the company to reach its mission and its vision. So it's a ton of value kind of pulling like a huge gravitational force to that main vision, those huge goals that the company's trying to achieve. And I think not spending time in meetings, um, showing how that's progressing and just how revenue is progressing and how user counts are progressing, those quantitative metrics are important, but you also have to show how they quantify a company's mission and a company's actual vision. And I think that's just as important.
No, I agree, and that's why like I refer to those statements as your guiding principles. And another way I put it is your compass. It should be they should be serving as your compass at every stage of your company's life cycle. It doesn't matter, like, if you're just starting to plan what the company should be, or yeah, you're already like, a multi-billion-dollar company, because every single strategy, every plan, every decision should be guided by those same principles. You should be using them as a compass to decide where you should be going. And it also plays into what you said to Boyan about your not to do list, right? And applying that in a slightly different manner, but similar methodology of recognizing what actions you can take which would work against those guiding principles, go against where the compass is telling you. And ultimately, as we talked about earlier, that just disrupts your brand. It dilutes your brand. It changes your brand. And a lot of people that are in alignment with your brand and bought into your community and everything about it will revolt when you do something that goes against those elements, because ultimately what you're trying to, like, what you're like signaling to them is that you don't care about them anymore. You're betraying them and their trust and their faith in where that alignment was established. So it's really like, yeah, insightful for you to share all that and cover all that. I think it's great. So yeah, we're up on time. I appreciate this. I appreciate Boyan and others contributing, asking questions. Yeah, do you have any final thoughts, any final announcements, anything coming up that you want people to know about? Now's the time.
Well, just connect. If you're watching this, reach out on LinkedIn and connect. I'm always trying to just give as much value as I can to people. Always talking business. It's kind of it's weird. People are like, business is the boring side, and I swear, growing up as a kid, I said I'll never have an office job where I'm sitting in an office behind a desk looking at numbers all day. And then somehow along the way, I became at some companies I work with the numbers guy, because that is still a big part of business. But also, I am. I think one thing that drew me to business so much is, well, personally, I've gamified it for myself. So when I'm engaging with businesses, I do think there's a best way for a business to win. Not that it's literally a competition against competitors, but it is a competition sometimes with just, you see something you want to improve in the world, and what's the best way to do it. And it's kind of a continuum, right? There's no one way to build a business or to build a product, but is there a best way? And you keep saying, well, then what's better than that best way? And you keep taking it further and further. And I think that's why I love business so much, is that it is flexible, it is variable. And even though I am sitting behind a desk most of the day, it's kind of like a game, but it's also super impactful. So if you're building a business, definitely connect with me. If you own a business, connect with me. And if you work for a business, connect with me. And even if you don't, it's still open. So feel free to reach out anytime. And like I said, I think community is a huge part of a business. So you never know who that person you connect with, or who someone else can connect with, will really add that next level of value to you and your company, and also the person that you can provide that kind of next level of value to as well. So always feel free to keep your doors open and reach out, because mine is always open as well.
Love it. Appreciate it. Again, totally in alignment with what we're doing here as well in regards to building those authentic relationships across the community. You never know. And yeah, the more people can act as a community, like, authentically, the happier and more fulfilled everyone can be, more supportive and collaborative and successful. So I appreciate you calling attention to that too. Yeah, William, I see you typing something. So, okay, beautiful. William said thank you. Thank you as well. All right, with that, Craig,
Of course, thank you.
yeah, I'll be following up with you and a few others in here about the next VIP lunch and a couple other fun stuff. But yeah, I'd love to have you back. I'm sure the community would love to have you back. And yeah, I'll follow up with that too. And everyone else, stay safe. Be smart. If you're in a fire risk area, make sure at least you have a checklist done. So if you gotta go, you gotta go. All right. With that, again, Craig, thank you so much. You're awesome.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
All right.
you.
Stay safe.